Nature is my gospel, and the mountains its hymnal. The music starts early. Driving westward in Colorado, into the mountains for a day hike, the sunrise chases the early morning hiker. Scorpius, its bright red gem Antares, fades into the sky as black turns to blue, then pink, orange, and gold. Sunrise alights the clouds with a color fire from below. A sharp, distinct sunrise line of warm pinks and reds stalks downward mountain slopes, turning trees to gold, foreshadowing the coming autumn. Hikers who make their trailheads early, who greet the sunrise at or near their start, are rewarded with a stillness unafforded anyone who arrives later. That time at the trailhead, early, is like untime, like a removal from time, as though all the clock hands have stopped, every pedestrian frozen mid-stride, and wind-blown leaves and dust pauses in midair. Moments at the trailheads like that, they are a removal from the movement through space that we perceive as time's passage. We live, we exist in a rolling eighth of a second of awareness. That's what our brains process, roughly, and what we call now. That now, however, it's simply a tiny race car driving steadily on a timeline that commenced with, and likewise will end with, the universe. How amazing it is that we can perceive and have a sense of something so monumentally amazing, and so fundamentally tied to existence as that rolling moment we call now. Time is a distance that our universe travels through space, a distance emotionally and mentally from the events of the past, an increasing distance or closeness to another person, and an unavoidable and eventual collision with the future. There are moments in our lives at which we will be oblivious of time, and others at which we are more aware of time than we are of our own thoughts. Hikes, for me, are my time to lose track of it. The opposite for me have been those events when family gathers, faces drawn, waiting as a heartbeat slows slowly, aware that the time between each shallower breath lengthens. In those moments, it feels like we seek to stretch time, to pull it like the sun pulls out the long comet tails so that each quantifiable moment blends with the next 3 or 5. Mount Sherman feels a place removed from time, or perhaps it's better to say it feels like that race car of time moves slowly here. The mountain takes that early morning hiker's sensation and holds it as though it seeks to fight off the staves of weather and repeated freezing and thawing, and the forces that erode it daily. Though not hard to reach, not far from the nearest home, the mountain, decorated with mining ruins like freckles decorate the faces of fair-skinned redheads, feels stolen from the century before last, feels misplaced now. Mining ruins provide the hiker, or photographer, with an opportunity to become lost in fascination and wonder. The equipment maker and company names on the remaining machines, the majority of those companies no longer exist except in forged-on logos, references in history books, and memories. How amazing it is that our time allows us to visit mining ruins, some dating to before Colorado's statehood, and to do so with such amazing photography equipment that we can create images that record the detail and a near palpable texture in the wood in our images. Our images can capture the movement of clouds in the sky, and we can manipulate time in them to convert seconds or minutes into a single image that will, we hope, outlast us. Time is the wind in our hair, hands on our back, a hill beneath our bike. Time gives existence to and then makes ghosts of all things. Galaxies, stars, planets, comets, continents, mountains, mines, and us. We are fortunate now to exist alongside the Rockies in this iteration. The high plains are rising as the planet's plates collide and the forces of weather move the material that makes our mountains down their slopes and amphitheaters. When the Rocky Mountains collide with their future, they will be less bumpy, the high plains even higher. In some millions of years, Colorado's 14ers will be ghosts, perturbations in an otherwise gentle landscape. Colorado may be a barren and flat desert, or the basin beneath another inland ocean. And this won't be the first time either. Around 310 million years ago, the ancestral Rocky Mountains formed and towered over swampland. A short 40 million years later, those mountains had started to erode into the sand dunes of the giant desert that was, and surrounded, Colorado. 60 million years later, Colorado was somewhat less bumpy and filled with dense forests. By 200 million years ago, the ancestral Rocky Mountains relief had diminished significantly, and Colorado was again a desert. From 100 to 70 million years ago, a gigantic inland ocean and its advancing and receding shorelines covered much of a generally flat Colorado. We know all this because the ghosts of each period exist in the layers of rock, fossils, and the scarp faces formed as shifting tectonic plates lifted all those clues into the light. Those same plates, from 80 to 55 million years ago, created the Rocky Mountains we know today. The Rockies were forming when a meteor impacted the Yucatan and eradicated most of life on Earth. To these mountains, the rise of human civilizations would be an inconsequentially brief moment, and the minerals that formed over millions of years, their mining and removal would pass like an instant to Mount Sherman. The ghosts of Colorado's mining history linger in the Rocky Mountains. Mine ruins, the last scattered bones of the frontier, dot the hills and rest beneath the short and dense shrubs above treeline. Miners quickly depleted the ore that could be milled physically with stamp mills. Smelters and alchemy, aided by the many Colorado railroads, allowed mining to continue once the rich and easy seams went extinct. Though mining continues today, the largest boom in mining here occurred inside of a century, inside the potential lifespan of the youngest of the first miners. From the mid-1800s to the beginning of the last century, mining peaked in Colorado. Humans built pack trails and turned them into wagon roads, and then highways over the mountain passes. We dug tunnels and connected the coasts with railroad lines. All this occurred in less than half a century, a pace of change faster than anything humans had achieved before. To the people who lived here then, it must have felt like time itself was speeding up. Time has not been kind to the mining equipment on Mount Sherman. The environment above 12,000 feet is as unforgiving as gravel to a road bike. Wind and rain are daily forces. On the day that I hiked Mount Sherman, we had sustained winds of 60 miles per hour, which is almost 100 kilometers per hour. The gusts were so strong that some hikers in the saddle with Mount Sheridan were knocked over. We also had, all at once, snow, hail, sleet, ice, and rain when the afternoon thunderstorms moved in. That weather is frequent. No one at the time these mines were active expected most mines to produce well for more than a few decades. Why build buildings that could last longer? That mine buildings still have any recognizable form after 60 to 100 years or more of punishing weather on a near daily basis attests to the surprising quality of their construction. In fact, the Hilltop Mine's two-story tram hoist building stood recognizable until sometime in 2018 or 2019, when finally the tallest structure on Mount Sherman fell, scattering timbers like craps dice down the mountain slope. Photos of the mine from 2 years ago look no different than photos from 20 or more years ago. But the building collided with its future. Mine ruins surround themselves as they collapse in the bones of their structures, like a whale carcass decaying on the ocean floor, Old mine buildings feel connected to the lives they once had. But that connection is weakening, slowing slowly. The time between the falling timbers, the partial collapses, extending, each becoming smaller and weaker than the previous. Weathered and warped wood planks, forged square nails, and the rocks used for structure surround the nakedness of rust-protected, thick-skinned, forged iron smelters. Furnaces and the motors that miners carried up mountains on early pack trails with mules and wagons. Those large pieces are, in places, all that remains at the head of a comet tail-like stream of wood beams showing which direction the wind moves. But though it feels quite the opposite, time does not stand motionless on Mount Sherman, and that anything can withstand a century in these environments is, in and of itself, staggering to comprehend. The Mount Sherman hike from 4 Mile Creek is defined by periods of challenge and rest, an easy class too. Only 6 routes summiting various 14ers here in Colorado are easier. Mount Sherman itself is referred to as a simple stroll by those hikers who tackle the harder peaks like Pyramid, Capitol, and the Maroon Bells. Mount Sherman's first mile leads to a gentle plateau, a place to walk with leisure and catch one's breath. After the plateau, another incline leads to another rest. Then comes the incline to the saddle, and then a short and narrow rest before the long upward incline, a steep hike up a gravel wall that feels, at times, the way that bad 80s television portrayed quicksand. Each step feels like it pulls the hiker's boot back. Each slide feels like the hiker makes the mountain slightly shorter, hastening the inevitable, though hopefully still distant, future for Mount Sherman when some future surveyor will declare it to no longer be a 14er. Finally, then the trail levels and becomes an easily recognizable trail with some gentle ups and downs, rocking like a bass boat in a small lake until the summit. Mount Sherman's summit is marked by cairns and hand-stacked stone walls that form windbreaks, and on the day I hiked it, some homemade cardboard signs that other hikers had used in photos and then discarded. The windbreaks provide welcome relief. Mount Sherman's summit, being generally long and flat, undulating like a lazy snake, holds the bizarre distinction of also being the only 14er summit in Colorado, and likely most anywhere, to have had a plain land on it. When I reached the summit, it was, for many, a place to rest, to lunch, to catch their breath, and to watch the weather so as to gauge their pace down. Weather rolls into the mountains like a furious child entering a quiet room, throwing a fast and aggressive temper tantrum before returning to calm. But in the storms, there can be significant risk, with lightning above treeline being one of the threats of which hikers need to be most wary. Hiking into the weather with a view of the clouds blocked by a mountain ridge or summit presents the greatest weather risk. Every year, hikers are caught off guard by a storm that approaches beyond their view. In those moments, time becomes the hiker's greatest enemy, and the trip down the mountain, or the time crouched, waiting for static tingling to dissipate, turns each plonk unit into an epoch. Summiting any 14er is an accomplishment, not only in the act of summiting that 14er, but in the work needed to prepare for it. These are not hikes that someone does the day they begin hiking or the day they change their life to be active in the outdoors. These mountains have been here in their own rolling, brief moment for epochs. Time has no meaning for mountains. They are hymns in starlight, ghosts in a new moon, an impossibly long heartbeat, and they will be the last things that bear witness to the fact that humanity walked this planet.